When we think about trauma, we often focus on the obvious scars, the memories that haunt us, or the ways it disrupts our daily lives. But there's something far more insidious that trauma does to us. Something that reaches into the very core of who we are and whispers a lie so persistent that we begin to believe it as truth. Trauma convinces us that we are fundamentally unworthy of love. This isn't just about feeling sad or having low self-esteem. This is about a deep, cellular belief that we are somehow defective, broken, or insufficient in ways that make us undeserving of the very thing we need most as human beings: genuine connection and unconditional love. The relationship between trauma and our sense of worthiness begins in childhood, often before we even have words to describe what's happening to us. When a child experiences neglect, abuse, or emotional unavailability from their caregivers, their developing brain doesn't have the capacity to understand that the problem lies with the adult's inability to provide proper care. Instead, the child's mind, in its desperate attempt to make sense of the world, concludes that something must be wrong with them. This is actually a survival mechanism. It's psychologically safer for a child to believe they are bad than to accept that their primary caregivers, upon whom their very survival depends, are unreliable or harmful. This early programming becomes the foundation for how we see ourselves in relationships throughout our lives. The child who was criticized, ignored, or punished for expressing their needs learns that their authentic self is somehow problematic. They begin to develop what we might call a false self, a version of themselves that they believe will be more acceptable to others. This false self becomes a mask they wear, always trying to be good enough, perfect enough, or helpful enough to finally earn the love they've been seeking since childhood. The tragedy is that no matter how much external validation someone receives, if they carry this deep wound of unworthiness, they will find ways to dismiss, minimize, or completely reject the love that comes their way. They might think, if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me, or they're just being nice, or I must be fooling them somehow. This creates a painful paradox where the very thing they crave most becomes the thing they push away, because accepting love would mean confronting the possibility that their fundamental belief about themselves might be wrong. What makes this pattern so persistent is that trauma doesn't just affect our thoughts, it literally changes our brain structure and nervous system. When we experience trauma, especially in childhood, it activates our stress response system in ways that can become chronic. Our nervous system becomes hypervigilant, always scanning for signs of rejection, abandonment, or harm. This means that even in safe relationships, we might interpret neutral behaviors as signs that we're not wanted, or we might unconsciously create conflict to confirm our belief that we're unlovable.
The body keeps score of these early experiences in ways that our conscious mind might not even remember. Someone might have no clear memory of early neglect, but their body still carries the imprint of not feeling safe, seen, or valued. This shows up in adult relationships as an inability to fully receive love, a tendency to self-sabotage when things are going well, or a pattern of choosing partners who are emotionally unavailable, thereby recreating the familiar dynamic of not being truly seen or cherished. Understanding this connection helps us recognize that the belief, "I am unworthy of love," isn't actually about our inherent value as human beings. It's a learned response to early experiences that taught us we had to earn love through performance, perfection, or self-sacrifice. The child who is only praised for achievements learns that love is conditional on success. The child who is punished for expressing anger learns that certain parts of themselves are unacceptable. The child who is parentified and forced to take care of others learns that their worth depends on how useful they are to other people. These early lessons create what we might think of as an internal critic, a voice that constantly evaluates whether we're good enough to deserve love. This critic is relentless, pointing out our flaws, magnifying our mistakes, and dismissing our positive qualities. It's like having a harsh judge living in our heads, one who never finds us quite measuring up to some impossible standard. The exhausting thing about this internal dynamic is that it makes genuine intimacy feel dangerous, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means risking that someone might see our imperfections and confirm our worst fears about ourselves. The impact of trauma on our capacity to receive love also shows up in our relationship patterns. We might find ourselves attracted to people who are emotionally distant, critical, or unreliable because this feels familiar, even though it's painful. There's something about the familiar struggle to win someone's love that feels like home, even when home wasn't a safe place. On the flip side, when someone shows us consistent kindness, availability, and genuine care, it might feel overwhelming, suspicious, or even boring because it doesn't match our internal programming about what love looks like. This creates a cruel irony where the relationships that would actually be healing for us feel foreign and uncomfortable, while the relationships that recreate our early wounds feel normal and right. It's like being addicted to a substance that's slowly poisoning us, but it's the only substance we know how to metabolize. Breaking free from this pattern requires not just understanding it intellectually, but actually rewiring our nervous system and learning to tolerate the discomfort of unfamiliar but healthy love.
The shame that accompanies trauma based unworthiness is particularly toxic because it's not just about things we've done, but about who we are at our core. Guilt says, I did something bad, but shame says, I am bad. When trauma creates shame, it convinces us that our very existence is somehow wrong or burdensome. This might show up as chronic apologizing, difficulty taking up space, or a tendency to make ourselves smaller to avoid being too much for other people. Recovery from trauma-based unworthiness isn't about positive thinking or simply deciding to believe we're lovable. It requires understanding that our nervous system is operating from old information, like a smoke detector that's too sensitive and goes off even when someone burns toast. The alarm system isn't broken, it's just calibrated to detect danger that's no longer present. Learning to feel worthy of love means gently updating this system, teaching our bodies and minds that it's safe to be seen, to have needs, and to take up space in the world. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to pause and ask you something that might feel uncomfortable, but is worth considering. Have you ever noticed yourself pushing away someone who genuinely cares about you, or finding reasons why their love doesn't count or isn't real? Have you ever felt more comfortable in relationships where you're working hard to prove your worth, rather than relationships where your worth is simply accepted? These aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're actually signs of a nervous system that's protecting you based on old information. If you're finding yourself nodding along with any of this, or if it's bringing up some feelings or memories, I want you to know that you're not alone in this experience. Thank you for clicking on this video and for being here with me today. You're watching Not What It Seems, where we explore the deeper patterns that shape our lives and relationships. I'm grateful you're here, and I hope this conversation is giving you some new ways to think about your own experiences. We share content like this daily, so you're in the right place if you're ready to look beneath the surface of these patterns. The journey toward feeling worthy of love often begins with recognizing that our earliest relationships taught us more about the emotional capacity of our caregivers than about our own inherent value.
A parent who was overwhelmed, traumatized, or emotionally unavailable wasn't responding to something lacking in us as children. They were responding from their own limitations, their own wounds, their own inability to regulate their emotions and provide the consistent, attuned care that children need to develop a secure sense of self.
This realization can be both liberating and grief-inducing. It's liberating because it means we can stop searching for evidence of our unworthiness and start questioning the story we've been telling ourselves. But it's also grief-inducing because it means acknowledging that we didn't get what we needed when we needed it most, and that loss deserves to be mourned. Many people skip over this grief, wanting to move quickly to forgiveness or understanding, but the grief is actually a necessary part of the healing process. The development of secure attachment later in life often requires finding what we call corrective experiences, relationships where we can slowly learn that it's safe to be authentic, to have needs, and to receive care without having to earn it. These might be romantic relationships, friendships, therapeutic relationships, or even our relationship with ourselves. The key is that these experiences happen slowly with people who can stay present and consistent even when our old patterns get activated. One of the most challenging aspects of healing from trauma-based unworthiness is learning to tolerate the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. When we've spent years hiding behind a false self, the prospect of showing up authentically can feel terrifying. What if they see who we really are and decide we're too much, too little, too broken, or too needy? This fear often keeps us trapped in surface-level connections that feel safe, but ultimately leave us feeling even more isolated and unworthy. The paradox is that the very vulnerability we're afraid of is actually what creates the deeper connections we're longing for. When we risk being seen in our imperfection, we give others permission to do the same. This creates what we might call authentic intimacy, where love doesn't depend on performance or perfection, but on the courage to show up as we are. This doesn't mean we should be reckless with our vulnerability, but rather that we learn to discern who deserves access to our tender places. Learning to receive love also means developing what we might call emotional literacy, the ability to recognize and name our feelings without immediately judging them as good or bad. Many people who struggle with unworthiness have learned to suppress or ignore their emotions because expressing them wasn't safe in their early environment. Reconnecting with our emotional life is like learning a language we once spoke fluently but have forgotten. It takes practice and patience.
The process of healing also involves learning to be with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or make it go away. When we've been conditioned to believe we're unworthy, moments of genuine love and acceptance can actually feel more uncomfortable than familiar rejection. This isn't because we're masochistic or self-destructive, but because our nervous system hasn't learned to recognize safety and care as normal states of being. One of the most powerful realizations in this journey is understanding that our worth isn't something we have to earn or prove. It's not based on our achievements, our usefulness to others, or our ability to avoid making mistakes. Our worth is inherent, built into the very fact of our existence. This concept can be difficult to grasp intellectually, let alone feel in our bodies, especially when we've spent years believing the opposite. The practice of self-compassion becomes crucial here. Instead of treating ourselves with the harsh criticism we learned early on, we can begin to speak to ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a good friend. This isn't about making excuses for our behaviors or avoiding accountability, but about recognizing that we're human beings, doing our best with the tools and understanding we currently have. Recovery also involves learning to set boundaries, which can feel impossible when we believe our worth depends on being useful or agreeable to others. Boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're more like the fence around a garden that protects what's growing inside. When we learn to say no to things that don't serve us, we create space for relationships and experiences that truly nourish us. The relationship between trauma and unworthiness also shows up in our relationship with success and achievement. Some people become overachievers, constantly trying to prove their worth through external accomplishments. Others become underachievers, giving up before they start because they believe they're destined to fail anyway. Both patterns are attempts to manage the underlying belief that we're not enough as we are.
Understanding these patterns can help us recognize when we're operating from old wounds versus our authentic desires. Are we pursuing certain goals because they genuinely align with our values and interests, or because we believe they'll finally make us worthy of love? Are we avoiding opportunities because we're afraid of failure, or because we're convinced we don't deserve success? These are important questions to explore with curiosity rather than judgment. The journey toward feeling worthy of love isn't linear, and it's not about reaching some final destination where we never doubt ourselves again. It's more like learning to dance with uncertainty, to notice when our old patterns are activated without being controlled by them. It's about developing the capacity to soothe ourselves when we're triggered, to seek support when we need it, and to stay present even when our minds are telling us stories about our unworthiness. As we come to the end of our exploration today, I want to leave you with this thought. The very fact that you're here, listening to this, seeking to understand these patterns, is evidence of your inherent worth. Your curiosity about healing, your willingness to examine difficult truths, your desire for deeper connection, these are all signs of a spirit that knows, somewhere deep down, that you deserve love and belonging. The work isn't about convincing yourself of your worth. It's about removing the obstacles that prevent you from feeling what was always true. You are worthy of love, not because of what you do or don't do, but because of who you are. And that's not something that can ever be taken away from you. If this video resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd give it a like to help others find this content. Feel free to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below if you feel moved to do so. And if you're interested in exploring more content like this, consider subscribing to Not What It Seems. There's another video appearing on your screen right now that might be just what you need to hear today. Thank you for being here, and remember, you're exactly where you need to be on this journey.